O'Brien to the Around the NFL podcast. My name is Dan Hansis. Coming to you from room filled with heroes, Mark Sessler, Chris Wessling, and Greg Rosenthal. What is up, boys?
Hey, Dan.
Divisional round weekend in the books. And a very interesting, I wouldn't say it was a classic divisional round weekend. Sometimes with these weekends, and there's a reason why everybody's like, oh, it's the best weekend of the year. Including me saying
you multiple times.
Is that because you have all these great teams at this point, and the flotsam has been jettisoned. The Jetson has been jettisoned. The Jets have been jettisoned.
Right.
Usually you just have great games, and we
took 49 seconds for the Jets to be mentioned on the show.
We struggle. Well, the Patriots won't come up much either this week, I can tell you that.
Oh, wait a
Actually, no, your wide receiver's in jail right now. We'll get to that.
He broke out. Beverly Hills. They can't keep him down.
Oh, we'll get to Zolak, too. What a mess. Clean it up, bro. Be a professional. All right. Let's be pros ourselves. We did not have a close game for the first three games of the divisional round weekend. Well, there was close. The first game today got close, and then it got really out of control. And then finally, the late game, the Seahawks show a pulse and turned that into a nail-biter down the stretch. We needed that, Wes. We wanted at least one nail-biter in divisional round weekend.
Well, Greg was pulling for a close game. I was pulling for the Packers to do away with the imposters who are the Seahawks.
Ooh.
It's basically Russell Wilson carrying a
Go Hawks.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one ended up being a dud. But the other three were fascinating in their own ways. Like this last game, it was close. The other two were more fascinating to me. I mean, that was like a divisional round game. And the Ravens game, I think we'll remember a long time from now. And we've never seen a game quite like Texans-Chiefs. So even though they weren't close at the end, blowouts can be kind of fun and interesting too.
I'd say of the four of us, I enjoy blowouts for multiple reasons. But in this case, like forget the close games. Like insane plot points were written and authored and filmed. I mean, stuff happened that shocked the senses. So I don't care if it's a close game when like things are happening that completely change the story.
That we got a much-needed fresh batch of narratives
I
that
do
we
think
can carry through an entire offseason?
I think some things were getting a little predictable and stale where we thought, and even on our network show on Friday, I authored a prediction from long ago that I thought was rock solid, and it got blown up in 2 minutes. Everything we said on that show got blown up for the most part.
Yeah, actually, everything I said played out.
No, I think my Vikings pick looked great mid Saturday afternoon.
All right, so let's get to the games, and let's go like we did last week in reverse order from the game that just got finished to the first game that was played. So that then takes us, of course, to Lambeau Field.
Rodgers in the shotgun, takes the snap, rushes on, lofts it over the right side. Devontae over the shoulder, catch, out of bounds, cross the 50. First down, Green Bay, the 46-yard line of Seattle. That was huge. A beautiful throw, over the shoulder catch, Devontae Adams.
Oh, yes, Wayne Larrivee with the call for the Packers radio network. Yes, with the Seahawks charging hard and Russell Wilson looking to crush hearts. In Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers delivered a "I'm Aaron Rodgers, damn it" moment, the one we've been waiting for. Two huge third-and-long conversions late in the fourth quarter allowed the Packers to run out the clock and punch their ticket to the NFC title game 28-23 over Seattle. Wes, let's go back to your cornhole analogy with Rodgers. Sometimes in that fine parlor game, the hardest point to get is when it's 20-17. Just put it on the board and you win. And Rodgers was facing that moment. He needed to make that throw to get him home, to send the Seahawks out of the party, and that's what he did.
I feel like the Packers were up like 17-10 in cornhole. Seahawks brought it back, and then there's 6 bags blocking the hole, and Rodgers throws it and pushes 2 of his in, and then goes in right behind it.
What a heartbreaker when that happens.
It was a perfect throw, and I think that was part of the analogy to begin with. He can make these throws, and that's why he keeps trying to do it.
And today he didn't miss on the tough throws. Eric Eager of PFF pointed out he was perfect on throws that went over 10 yards. 6 for 6 for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. And you think of the end of the game, which also included a clutch throw to Geronimo Allison on the drive before, which helped burn some clock, the throw to Jimmy Graham. But you also think early in the game, on the first drive, there were multiple third and longs where he hit the throw on time to his first read, which are the kind of throws you haven't seen a ton from the Packers, or at least not consistently. And he was hitting his back foot, and he was letting it go, and it was looking like a vintage Rodgers performance for the most part.
I wonder where they will wind up, because I'm still concerned about the lack of weapons on offense.
They're in the NFC Championship.
No, I'm just saying.
Final four, baby.
As we have to mine on and start to look at that game, you're going to be facing a completely different defense than the broken down Seahawks defense that, I thought they hung around in this game, Seattle, because they themselves simply do that in every single game. But this, for a long stretch of time, looked like Green Bay might just completely wind up dropping a mega hammer on Seattle because they could run the ball. They were just sort of having their way on offense, and I don't feel like we've seen a lot of that from Green Bay's, attack of late, but they were playing a team that was on its last gasp of air, and that's not going to be the case when you go into San Francisco.
4 touchdowns in their first 6 drives. That's a pretty dominant.
Then went dark, though.
Right, they went dark, and Davante Adams was fantastic, but all other Packers wide receivers combined for 19 yards on 2 catches. Allen Lazard held without a catch, and the other wide receivers were outproduced by December waiver pickup kick returner Tyler Ervin, and this is on Dan's radar. I know the Packers
it was
wide
in August.
receivers.
Like they ignored the position. They waited for these second-year guys to step up. It never happened, and it's too late now to fix it. So now it's just Aaron Rodgers find a way.
It was an A+, though. They had 8 possessions, and they scored 4 touchdowns, and then they killed the clock to win the game at the end. That's 5 of the 8 possessions. Maybe not an A+, an A-. The defense
for them
couldn't get a stop in the second half, and they did what they could. I'm looking across the field at Russell Wilson and thinking, who has more help, Wilson or Rodgers? Yeah, you have Lockett and Metcalf, and that's shiny, but you got an awful offensive line. You've got Marshawn Lynch running 12 for 26, and you've got Malik Turner dropping the first down throw on what turned out to be the Seahawks' last drive of the season, which to me is kind of an overlooked moment in that game. That was an easy 13-yard completion that went right off his chest. They end up taking a sack, which makes it 4th and 11, and they end up punting the ball, which I think is a questionable decision by Pete Carroll, that at least of all the 3rd and 10s that they've picked up in this offseason, I get it.
It's not a Seahawks game if you aren't questioning Pete Carroll's approach to something. So
here, when you're getting when you're getting a Hall of Fame quarterback at the very peak of his powers, and you're doing your best to limit his impact on the game, I think you deserve
what I would
criticism.
say, though, their approach out of the gate, I wish they had just sort of ran the entire affair the way they did in the second half. Just basically.
Like we say that every game with Russell.
It is true, but they continue to do that. They kind of drive you nuts because there was way too much Marshawn Lynch, like in the middle of the field early on.
Let me give you a stat.
Sure.
Marshawn Lynch and Travis Homer carried 32 times for 58 yards in the playoffs.
Ugh.
Less than 2 yards a carry, and they stayed with the stutter-stepping Marshawn Lynch. I understand at the goal line you're going to do that, but not in the middle of the field.
Right.
They had 3 huge plays in the last 3.5 minutes of the game. You had the 3rd and 5, Seattle at their own 42 with 3:22 to play. Preston Smith, who's been doing it all year because Brian Gutekunst knows exactly what he's doing.
Goody! He's got my executive of the year.
Turn this up in my ears, Ricky.
Does he?
Goody. Sure. It's made up.
John Lynch.
That was a huge sack by Preston Smith with Jacob Hollister, a tight end, trying to block it.
This is Brian Gutekunst singing, by the way.
Absolutely.
Or barking.
After he signed the Smith brothers.
So he killed it. Preston Smith again steps up with a huge play. The 4th and 11, they punted, as you said, Greg. It should keep in mind that as great as the Packers were, they had scored 3 consecutive touchdown drives of 75, 60, and 75 early in the third quarter. They got him off the field, the Seattle defense, twice in a row. 3 plays and out, and then an 8-play, 25 yards and out. So I guess Carroll said, we have the momentum. Let's kick it away. We don't want to lose this game on a 4th and forever, which is 4th and 11 is getting in that range.
Stop them and force them to kick a field goal, and you're
go
still
win the game, Russell
game.
Wilson. And what I think was so huge, that stop on 3rd and 5, the Green Bay defense was gassed because they were going up and down the field, Seattle. They had scored 3 consecutive touchdowns, and like I just said, the Green Bay offense was getting on and off the field quickly. So to step up with that sack was the play of the season, I thought, for Green Bay before the 2 passes by Rodgers when they got on the field. The throw that we heard to Davante Adams, and then Jimmy Graham, who hasn't made a big play in forever, with the game hanging in the balance, again 3rd and long. A nice pass by Rodgers, a little low, and Jimmy Graham went and got it and then fell onto the first down line. Game over. So in a season where Rodgers hasn't had a lot of weapons outside of Davante Adams and Aaron Jones, he got the last little bit of playmaking ability out of Jimmy Graham, and they're in the Final Four because of it.
You got to give the coaches some credit, too. I think having Davante Adams matched up against Uga Amadi, who I think was viewed as a weakness of this defense, on like a slot fade, which is, you've seen a lot this year on third. I mean, that's great coaching, and you see Rodgers recognize the blitz, Aaron Jones with the great blitz pickup. I mean, they picked the right matchups when it mattered.
Hats off to Russell Wilson, whose playing style sort of reminds me of the Harlem Globetrotters distilled into one corporeal entity. I don't think
this is why Wes makes the big bucks.
The Seahawks did not plan to go into the postseason with Russell Wilson, Travis Homer, Marshawn Lynch, Jacob Hollister, and Malik Turner as key figures. I mean, congratulations to them for getting this far, but that was not a playoff roster the last 2 weeks.
Right, and you're right. And I was, before the game I said they had a disadvantage at quarterback. The Packers did. In this game, I think both quarterbacks played outstanding. But I think, and maybe it's because I follow too many people on Seahawks Twitter. Although, is that possible? Seahawks Twitter.
You're watching them from afar.
Is that a humble brag? I don't think it is.
Here's what I'm saying. They're all obsessive. Like, are we maximizing Russell Wilson? Is he having to overcome this coaching staff? Not only Brian Schottenheimer, but Pete Carroll.
Carroll taking shots again.
Brian Schottenheimer, is this the right guy to be running their offense? And then Pete Carroll is a defensive coach who's coached 2 mediocre defenses in a row, and that's fine if you play that way. But we talked about it. I talked about it in week 4 or 5. He's coaching this team he wishes he had that could run and play defense. He doesn't have that team.
Well, that's I think the point we made before is like they kept trying to be what Brian Schottenheimer wants them to be until they said, wait a minute, we're going to get waxed if we continue that. On the flip side, Matt Lafleur, I feel like now, no matter what happens, had they lost this playoff game, you go into the offseason with a lot of questions about a 13-3 team that wasn't really the record. This is a huge win for Matt Lafleur.
Absolutely.
But that said, you are right now at the same precipice that Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers have been at throughout essentially the entire last decade. And I don't like their chances in San Francisco, but this is the same song and dance for Aaron Rodgers 100 times.
I mean, this is great, though.
I'm not raining on his parade.
You kind of are.
You
are convinced that the Packers
they've overachieved.
The better team
by
won,
any measure.
The better team won, but I am not convinced that Aaron Rodgers gets any better than this game for the rest of his career.
Are going to be, I don't know what the desert says, but the 49ers are going to be a favorite in this game. People are going to disregard the Packers, but I mean, listen, it might be.
Well, you guys don't sound like you are.
I'm not. No, I think it's too simplistic.
The 49ers are the better team. Of course they'll be.
I just think that
I'm just saying it's a little. Maybe it's too simplistic to say this, but a team that's won 14 of 17 games in an NFL season, and we're getting into mid-January, should not be completely discounted.
Well, and we would be fools at this point to try to sell anyone watching this a bill of goods saying we know exactly what's going to happen, because these games are a complete dart at a dartboard that's 40 yards away in the middle of the night. But I still think
what a throw just to even get it near the
dart. I mean, what a throw by you to complete that analogy. The dart was wavering midair. Didn't think it was getting there, and then the bullseye.
Mark just used a parlor game analogy. Imagine how difficult that must have been.
Well, we got this side of the table has both used parlor game analogies to discuss the Packers at this point. So your turn.
Billiards, what a sport. You got the cue ball. No, I don't have anything yet. Speaking of Aaron Rodgers, after the game, I like Aaron Rodgers' cliches and scripted answers. I just think they're fun. Obviously, Erin Andrews at Fox has a nice little relationship with Mr. Rodgers. It's been going on for years now. They've been in the league together, her covering the league, him as a star. She asked him after the game what he's got kind of cooking in his mind as they prepare to face a 49ers team that blew their doors off about a month ago.
You're the king of mottos. Do you have one heading into the NFC Championship against San Francisco? What do you got? Come on.
I'm just going to enjoy a nice glass of scotch tonight and get on to the film, San Fran, and get ready for a tough opponent.
All right, old man. I can joke with you about that. Congrats.
Thanks.
The king of mottos. That's how we know him.
You know how upset RG3 is to hear that? That someone else is the king of mottos?
What a man after your heart, though, Wes. Give me a glass of scotch, and I'm going to tape it. Is that everything okay? I'm gonna tape dog all night with my scotch.
I feel like that's at least the fourth time I've heard Rodgers say after a game, "I'm gonna have a glass of scotch and enjoy this one."
That's his move.
Yeah, he does feel like a pole doll at some point where you're just gonna get there's like 8
Mark, stop it.
It's funny because
somebody put an umbrella over Sessler. It's raining.
It's funny because this whole year, all I heard about is that these two guys were on Seahawks corner. They couldn't have been rooting harder against the Packers in this game.
You're ridiculous. Speaking of overly simplistic, I was on Seahawks corner because they're a fun team that's always in the mix. I locked up the Packers.
Congrats to you.
Thank you.
That's right.
Because I believe that they were the better team. Seahawks were a team that were so beat up.
I'm with you. I'd rather see this game.
Hopefully their running game gets worked out. I love Marshawn Lynch, but I don't really need to see him on the field anymore. It's cool that he had 4 touchdowns this season to end what is a Hall of Fame career, in my opinion, but they need to get better and healthier.
I would say one thing. Seattle beat San Francisco and took them to the brink with that banged-up roster.
That's true.
Green Bay did not match up well the first time. I'm not trying to go down this road over and over. But
we agree with you.
Yeah,
but it's just – I think this is a nice night for the Green Bay Packers.
It is.
Who almost got disregarded as a number 2 seed, home
the better team
coming
won.
off a bye.
The better team took this game.
And I feel like Dan was pulling for the Packers. You were definitely pulling for Aaron Rodgers to hit that pass.
All
to Devontae
three of you were.
Do you know what I want?
That was my point.
I'm keeping it real, just as a football fan and someone who's going to be lucky enough to be covering the game. A Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl. Feed it to me. Put it in my veins. If that's how it works out, I actually would be cool with any Super Bowl combo, but that one is the one that I really want to see.
I mean, there is something special about it, especially in a season where Rodgers wasn't at his best, to maybe have his best game of the year or one of his best games of the year in this spot. I mean, he's so legendary. After the game, Marshawn Lynch entered the Packers locker room to do a jersey exchange and sign with Aaron Rodgers. Not many people are getting that sort of respect.
Couple of Cal graduates,
yeah,
right?
for his old teammate. I get it, but still,
he's
not doing that for anyone.
Mark, he came into the league. He's a 2010 draft class, right? He came into the league when you and I came to the NFL. I don't want the sun setting on his career because if it's setting on Aaron Rodgers' career, we might be in trouble too.
We're talking to who came into the league in 2010?
Aaron Rodgers, right?
Much earlier than that.
Wow. Oh, he won a Super Bowl in 2010.
Yes, that is true.
I mean, that's
it's
what
been a long time.
That's what advantage we have on these players. Their careers are. The sun is setting as they hit 40. We're just about to enter our prime, our broadcasting prime.
A bit more like a Romo scenario. I'll go with you on that.
That is a wild presumption by you. But
all right. So, Mark, the Packers are still alive. It's going to be that way for another 7 days.
I couldn't be happier for them, but I'm not. The three of you couldn't. You were all so pro Packers. I have to offer that challenges lie ahead. Challenges.
We disagree with you. No challenge lies ahead.
Like Packers, Chiefs, Super Bowl.
Yeah. Okay.
50-10.
To your point, yes, Mark. 3 of the teams that played this weekend that won their games should be miserable because they will eventually lose.
Well,
only one team ends up on top.
That is the ultimate.
And
picture.
I don't want next Sunday, if the 49ers win 38-20, I don't need some Sessler monologue about how you saw it coming and we didn't. That certainly can happen. But they shouldn't. I'm just saying they shouldn't be discounted in that game.
I don't think that anyone. I would not do that. We all agree that this is just the normal thing. Is that San Francisco's going to be favored, and I wouldn't be surprised if they took care of business without any issues.
All right, that is one game. Let's now move to the next game that occurred on Sunday, and it got weird at Arrowhead.
Kelsey trots in motion across the face of Mahomes, who sprints out to the left side. He's holding it. He's going to try to hold it. Throws it late. Is it caught it's caught. Touchdown! Kansas City. The Chiefs take the lead. And Kelsey with another catch on a sprint out run pass option again. And Kelsey gargling in the sweet nectar of the end zone.
Ryan Bartlett behind the glass said, "It's a good one. Mitch nailed this one." You say gargling?
Gargling that nectar.
Like that gargling?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of gross.
It's a tad
because it's thick. The nectar.
It usually is.
It's a tough thing to gargle, I imagine. All right. Here we go. Mitch Holthus with the call. Chiefs Radio Network. Down 24-0 with 11 minutes to go in the second quarter. The Chiefs, they had a lot of work to do just to make the game respectable. Well, they did more than that. Patrick Mahomes threw 4 touchdown passes in the rest of that second quarter, giving them a lead by the end of the second quarter, a lead they would not relinquish. In fact, they build on it quite a bit. By the fourth quarter, It was a laugher. Final score 51-31, Chiefs over Texans, and they head to the AFC Championship game. Greg, this is one of the wildest outcomes in a long time in a game that is, this term gets thrown around too much, unique. This was a unique NFL football game.
We've never seen a game like this. Certainly never a first half like this in the playoffs. And yet, some people on the other side of the table here, Chris Wesley and Mark Sessler, saw it coming. I think that the minute that Bill O'Brien didn't go for fourth and inches to possibly go up 28-0, they kick a field goal, they make it 24. Once the Chiefs get back in that game 24-7, they're very confident that the Chiefs are going to come back and win this game comfortably, and that's exactly what they did. And my big takeaway from all of that is everyone killing on Bill O'Brien and pointing out the fourth and inches or other decisions.
4th and 3 fake
punt.
punt.
The fake punt. It's like Bill O'Brien wasn't playing defense for the Patrick Mahomes. You got to give credit to the Kansas City Chiefs, who scored 7 touchdowns in 7 possessions. One play call is not going to change that. What happened is just a far better team offensively exerted their will. And that was going to happen at some point in that game, I think, no matter what Bill O'Brien did.
I'm not going to kill Bill O'Brien. I thought he got the risk-reward wrong on the decision for the fake field goal, and then the decision to go for the field goal and then the fake. Those were backwards. I thought the risk-reward was wrong there. But the problem with this team is they have a really bad secondary, and that's been true all year. And then they lost 2 of their top 3 safeties in weeks 17 and 18, and they're playing Lonnie Johnson, a rookie cornerback, who they traded for Gary and Conley and picked up Vernon Hargreaves off waivers so they could bench Lonnie Johnson. And then in the playoffs, they were so desperate they had to put him on Travis Kelce, and that was a lopsided matchup, one of the most lopsided we've seen.
And that's why I don't hate what O'Brien did, although I know he went for the field goal. That was a little weak. Sometimes just give credit to the players, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like Mahomes, Watkins, Kelce, they're making these plays, and Daniel Sorensen made a great play on the fake punt.
Yes,
I think if the Texans coaches are watching that play again on film, they would still call it again. It took an unbelievable play to stop him.
One guy
and
miss,
O'Brien said after the game, he made it clear. He was like, we thought we needed to score touchdowns. We could not give the ball, giving the ball back to them.
Why did he kick a field goal at 4th and inches?
That's fair.
The Chiefs.
He spoke on that, and I'll say what he said in a minute. Go ahead, Mark.
The Chiefs basically did to the Texans what the Texans did to the Bills a week ago. They played they had mistakes. You know, it was 2 special teams gaffes that put the Chiefs in a hole. It wasn't their defense getting burned left and right.
Third down drops.
Right? I mean, just like uncharacteristic play. But unlike they fought back the way the Texans did against the Bills. But unlike the Ravens, who we'll talk about, they got out of their own way and solved their issues. Went on and scored. The possession chart is insane. They became the first team to score on 6 straight drives in a divisional round game since the Packers and the Mike Holmgren Seahawks in 2007. But then they went on to score a 7th straight touchdown. And I don't blame the Texans. They just basically drove a bike into a shredder. I mean, you cannot do a whole lot against the Chiefs when they suddenly
earned.
Like a paper shredder, or
like a gigantic one of those, like
one
when
of
you read
tree
about
shredders.
Like you just a bike goes off a jump into one of those giant shredders,
like tree shredder.
Yeah, tree shredder.
But
like
only
Fargo.
it's got to be large enough than a typical tree shredder, so the bike and the person could go into it.
The bike and the person representing the entire Texans team went off a jump into the shredder, and they got shredded.
There's a funnel effect in the shredder.
It was more than a funnel. It was separating the entire team into a billion pieces.
Yeah, people see what they want to see. Sometimes us included. We're all the same, you know. And in this case, it was like Twitter. Everybody's watching the same games now, and it gets crazy. It was like a Chernobyl level Twitter meltdown with the analysis in this game. In the first hour of the game in real time, everybody wanted to say Andy Reid needs to be sent out to pasture. He's put 10 feet under the ground. An hour later, Bill O'Brien's getting run out of the country. Which
happened to Bill O'Brien last weekend too.
I mean, it's just it is not healthy for 80 million people to be watching and commenting on the same thing at once. This is a very 2020 issue that somehow we need to eradicate. Putting some type of system, a lock system. I think someone threw it out there downstairs in the newsroom. Everyone gets 2 tweets per game and make them count, because you don't get to flip-flop, and it will keep the sheer volume of hot takes down.
I'd vote for that in a heartbeat.
I like that. I could think of some people that don't deserve 2 either, but that's
and some people don't. You have to clear a certain bar.
Can you get tweets taken away?
Who decides?
Tweets get taken away. We have to install some type of cabinet of people who confer and decide who gets to be a part of this.
It sounds like a job for Claybon.
Brinson and Claybon are on the cabinet.
That's very good. But so
should
the game
this guy
changed.
be tweeting, Dan? How about that?
Who? Oh, Zolak. What is going on with Scott Zolak? I mean, he was bombed, right? Zolak, I got to read some of these.
He claims
Zolak
he had
tweets.
the flu, but I mean, you can have all sorts of flus. So
I mean, he uses a derogatory term that I won't say on the air here for Travis Kelce, questioning his manhood and calling him a fake and all this stuff. Oh, Travis Kelce, who went 10 for 130
It was
and
one of the
3
best
touchdowns?
games by a tight end in postseason
10
history.
for 134 and 3. He had an early drop like the rest of his teammates, and then he proceeded to dominate.
The minute that tweet went out, he just essentially turned into like a human fireball.
And Scott Zolak, for people that don't know, is the the color guy for Patriots Radio Network. He has obviously free time this weekend, so he
the ridiculously over-the-top Patriots color guy.
Yes, and Zolak, he also claimed that he had the flu, and that is why he was tweeting in this manner. I cannot tell you, I don't remember a Sunday where more listeners of the show were hitting up my mentions saying, Dan, you're aware of this, right? You see what Zolak's doing on Twitter right now. Hey, Dan, just putting this on your radar. So, yes, we were tracking Zolak, who went dark, and it made me wonder, who shut down Zolak? Was it his wife? Was it someone from the radio station he works for? Was it the Patriots themselves? Because he did not have the flu. It was the man flu.
What? We've all had the flu
boozing.
before. Have you been tempted to tweet crazy stuff because you had the flu? I don't see the connection on why that led to tweets.
Yeah, I've lied before, and that's what that felt like.
The Texans' defense was so bad, I guess that Bill O'Brien didn't expect
Greg has
them
no
to
comments
do
on
it,
Scott
and-
Zolak.
No.
He's like, he's my man.
We don't
No.
claim him.
No one claims him. I'm surprised. I was more surprised that how many people follow Scott Zolak. What's wrong?
You were offended that I
It's
follow
sort of
him.
on you. At this point, it's 2020. If you've got bad people in your Twitter feed, that's on
He
you.
is entertaining. I will say this. Greg is smart because we will see him in a couple weeks on media night at the Super Bowl, and we were couched near him a couple
I mean,
years
if he gets
ago.
over the hangover.
Well, fair question.
Go ahead, Greg.
I think you can tell a lot by what Bill O'Brien said after the game, that basically they had no faith in stopping the Chiefs. And if you think about the start of that game, it wasn't like the Texans were stopping the Chiefs. The Chiefs were stopping the Chiefs. J.J. Watt had a rough day against Mitchell Schwartz. Whitney Merciless, didn't really make much noise. And then what's ultimately a slow team at the linebacker spot and not a very good secondary. Just had matchup problems everywhere. I mean, Sammy Watkins is making plays. Damian Williams is making plays. Mecole Hardman made a play. And there was a tweet about Mahomes in the locker room after the game, like laughing while looking at the stat sheet, and they asked what, and he was surprised how many rushing yards he had. Like Mahomes, to me, this is just another example of that he's the biggest dangerous weapon, whatever you want to call him. To me, he's the most talented quarterback that's ever played in terms of like every box being checked, and this was a great example of it. I mean, those throws he was making on the run to Kelce were outrageous throws. The Texans basically had the right defense on those plays. A lot of times with two on Kelce, and he's on the run thrown across his body. We've taken it almost for granted that Mahomes just does this because no one else is doing this. Sorry, Aaron Rodgers, he's not like no one else is doing it at this level when Mahomes
Well,
is
Aaron
cooking.
Rodgers has done this.
Yes,
in
in
his
the
career.
past.
It's kind of perfect that it happened this weekend. Last year, Mahomes was the belle of the ball and the MVP. He threw 50 touchdowns, all that good stuff. And then Lamar Jackson mania took over, and Jackson deserves every bit of positive, energy and comments his way because he was incredible this season. But on the same weekend that Jackson stumbles and goes out of the playoffs, I felt like this was just Patrick Mahomes reminding everyone, dude, I'm the best. I am at the top of my game right now, and I can do things nobody else can do.
I would say also because it's always the one thing I feel about the Chiefs, it's always lost in the offense, and it makes sense because of the gaudy numbers. I don't think they get back into this game with the speed that they do without Frank Clark absolutely devastating the Texans on key third downs. 3 sacks in this game, and they really the Texans offense went to sleep in a big way because they were discombobulated.
They allowed 12 sacks in 2 postseason games. That's a problem.
Frank Clark, we talked about in the preview show that Clark was a guy that had turned into a major menace in the second half of the season, and he had 3 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 4 QB hits, and he did it when they needed him to do it because they're playing shorthanded. We're feeling really good about this Chiefs team, right?
Absolutely.
We are the
without getting ahead of ourselves.
It was not a good defensive performance. I mean, you gave up 442 yards to the Texans. I know special teams was a problem early, but you gave up a lot of big. They're not the same without Chris Jones. To me, this was a lot closer without Juan Thornhill and Chris Jones on the field to the let's get by and let's count on Patrick Mahomes to put up 40-plus points type of defense than a defense that was really making a lot of plays. I mean, Deshaun Watson played great in this game too. He made a ton of plays. I mean, the Texans offense, to me, with Will Fuller, played it well enough to win this game.
Well, this defense they're not stout enough to stop Derrick Henry, but the difference is when the Chiefs fall behind, Mahomes is going to pass him out a bit. When the Ravens fall behind, they're not meant to be a pass-first operation. They're meant to be a run-first operation.
Right. It is. I do like that Will Fuller played in this game. He had 5 for 89. Hopkins goes 9 for 118. Kenny Stills gets a touchdown early where they victimize Sorensen. To me, this was the Texans team. You saw the representative effort, and they weren't good enough.
That's fine, but if I'm the Texans, you have got to go into next season with a duplicate of Will Fuller that is actually able to produce on a week-to-week basis.
That's what Kenny Stills was supposed to be.
Well, and
Kenny Stills made some plays this year.
He has.
He made a play in this game.
The numbers, and you broke it down last week, when he's not on the field, Will Fuller, I mean, the offense is compromised. They have work to do.
I think they're in a good spot, though, relatively, even though they traded away that first-round pick. The offense is pretty young. It has good continuity. They have all the cap space in the world. The defensive players, for the most part, other than maybe like DJ Reader, are all under contract for next year. We know Bill O'Brien's going to spend money. I mean, there's no reason not to expect them to be right back in the mix and maybe be better defensively. Romeo Crennel might retire or get forced to retire.
Why isn't Honey Badger still on this team? Why did they let him go in the first place? Could they not afford it last year?
That's a good question. My
feels
sense
like that
was,
would be a good piece.
They didn't think he was worth the top-level money that Kansas City got, and they were wrong.
And I think Honey Badger wanted to go play for a Super Bowl team.
All right, a couple more numbers, and then stats, and then I want to throw it to Andy Reid for the last word. The Chiefs are the first team in NFL history, regular season or playoffs, to trail by 24-plus points in the first half and be tied or leading entering halftime. Again, truly unique. The Chiefs scored 51 points in a span of 32 minutes. And they also announced on their big video board late in the game that they had run out of fireworks at Arrowhead because the Chiefs had scored so many points and so many times they ran.
That's a humble brag.
Out. That was. And finally, here's Andy Reid on what he said and what he was projecting to his players when things were looking very bad.
I just said, listen, this isn't you. I mean, let's just get back, relax, pump the brakes here for about a second, and refocus, and let's go. I mean, it's that simple, really. I mean, you're in that situation. You've only got a few quarters to play this game, so you got to get it done, and no need to panic, right? That's not going to help it at all. So you just try to fix the problem, and that's kind of what we did.
Speaking of Mitch Holthus, I listened to a tiny bit of the radio broadcast near the end of the second quarter, and he pointed out that Andy Reid is the king of the flashpoint. Like, he is a guy that when things are going sideways, one of his great skills as a head coach is getting a team under control, making sure they don't panic, making the adjustments, and also being that type of figure that you could kind of not get spooked over. So Reid, good coach, good number 1 overall pick in the coaches draft.
It was you, Dan, I think, who said that you had a envision
that
very nice pick. Of course, we circle back, but you envisioned him at opening night of Super Bowl week.
Want him on the riser.
I mean, you put a lot of people into that envisioning role. This when you put Rodgers there, I'm sure there's 3 or 4 others. But I think you're going to get your wish on Reid.
To me, with the Ravens, out, Mahomes Reid, that's the A story, at least for me. I'm sure obviously fan bases would feel differently, but
you're confusing me with Greg, by the way. He wanted someone on the riser. I couldn't remember. Kirk Cousins was.
I wanted Cousins.
I know, but I've dismissed that vision at this point.
Yeah,
Titans are freaky though.
Andy Reid's one of the greatest coaches of all time. I mean, to me he's much more of a Hall of Famer, than some coaches that are in the Hall of Fame, and he's got his young quarterback like this. If ever there was a time, this is his time. The Patriots lost to give him this bye. The Ravens lost to set up home field advantage. Like, if not now, then when?
Speaking of Zolak.
To give it to them, he took it.
Yeah, one of his crazed, maniacal tweets, Zolak today was, And none of this would be happening if we just beat the Dolphins.
Well, that's true.
Please.
So how about take care of business?
Let it go, bro. All right, let's head to halftime. By the way, you mentioned coaches that belong in the Hall of Fame. Jimmy Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
One of the great studio moments I've seen in a long time was the big man from the Hall of Fame, your boy, Marcus.
David Baker.
David Baker.
Bigger than a front door.
He lumbers out.
Literally.
That guy is a man, and he makes the official announcement. Jimmy Johnson immediately knows what it means when he sees big man Baker coming out.
You could fit all four of us inside of David Baker's form.
He's a man. And Jimmy Johnson on live television during the halftime of the late game finds out he's going to the Hall of Fame in part of the NFL 100 class. The day before, the same dog and pony trick was pulled. Baker went cross-country. He was in New York for the CBS show, and Bill Cowher also getting in. But the Jimmy Johnson one was excellent because he could barely talk. He was so choked up.
All of us with asthma were running for our inhalers when it looked like he was so choked up that he was having trouble breathing. And then I thought, whoever the producer was that said, let's get a Troy Aikman shot here, that was gold.
Yeah, and I think like we talked about our favorite announcer duos at this point, and I had to go with Aikman because of just my early football fandom and what that Cowboys team and what Aikman meant to me. But Jimmy Johnson is so tied and woven into that. I know that he was there for, about half the time that Aikman was, but he changed NFL history, and I feel honestly we're at the point where it's not just these old timers getting to the Hall of Fame. It's people that we watched and kind of bathed in their careers and saw them do what they do. And I honestly, because I was walking in as it was happening, and Dan was like, "Get over here." It made me feel something to watch Jimmy Johnson, and I did, and that was a whole different experience. But it was these are the things that
first thing Mark felt all weekend.
I remember
these are the things that make me love football because it's like it is a crowning achievement on someone that probably should have been in a long time ago.
He's one of those guys too. All the other coaches revere, like Belichick, and all the other coaches revere him as one of the all-time greats and couldn't understand. And it wouldn't surprise me if not only Belichick helped him get in because he was on this panel, but our old friend Elliot Harrison and Gil Brandt, who Elliot would stump so hard for Jimmy Johnson, and he was in that room as part of the panel. So I think Jimmy Johnson was a guy who it was like a mistake getting corrected.
Actually,
nice
I have footage of when I called Mark over. It's like, Mark, come here, sit on my lap.
Oh yeah.
This has been a weird show.
That is not how that went.
I remember learning like 5 years ago that Jimmy Johnson was not in the Hall of Fame, and I was just shocked by that.
Right.
How is he not in the Hall of Fame?
People forget how much of a wild leap it was to have a college coach come in and suddenly take over an NFL team.
Cowher's moment really got upstaged, because Cowher's moment was great too.
Nice moment for Bill too.
It was great.
In other future Hall of Fame head coach news, the Cleveland Browns have made a hire.
How dare you?
Vikings offensive coordinator Kevin Stefanski is their new head coach. NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport reported Sunday morning. Comes a day after the Vikings season ended in that loss to the Niners, which we'll get to in a little bit. But that didn't deter the Browns, who after 8 interviews, Robert Saleh, the Niners DC, was very close to getting the job, it sounds like, as well, but did not happen. They go with Stefanski, who is the 18th full-time head coach in franchise history, but I believe, 12? It's a lot in the last decade or so. Anyway, Mark, Stefanski in for Freddie Kitchens. Your take?
Well, it leaves me. It's hard to even know who Kevin Stefanski is. So it's a wait and see on that. And they've interviewed him now for about the range of 16, 17 hours over 2 off seasons. And Paul DePodesta, their analytics guy, wanted him last year and got his way this year. And I truly do think he got his way because the word essentially is that Josh McDaniels went in there and what he wanted to do was suggest massive sweeping changes to the Browns. Top down, take the organization, put it in the blender, and recreate it in Josh McDaniels' image.
The wood chipper.
Right. And Stefanski, and I mentioned here on a tweet that I thought he looks to me a little bit like a hot dad with a complicated home life and a Netflix dramedy because he certainly is a good-looking coach who looks the part. I don't know what much more about him at this point, so that's the end of my commentary on him. But it was Stefanski who went in and said, I will work with DePodesta, which includes, at this point, it sounds like, according to reports, having an analytics person in your headset, which is not offensive. That makes total sense to me.
A lot of coaches do that.
A lot do that. So if they weren't doing that, you're catching them up, and that's fine. But also, Jimmy Haslam did not want to part ways with certain structures and certain people inside the organization. So I think whatever happens with Josh McDaniels down the road and where he goes, they will always be measured by these other coaches that they did not bring into the building, because Stefanski essentially would do what Haslam wanted to do without blowing up the apple cart.
What about the report from Dustin Fox that the new head coach will have to hand in his homework on Friday so D. Podesta can take out his red pen and make it copious notes all over the game plan?
I mean, the Browns are going to get killed with that kind of report. Other teams are viewed as forward-thinking and right where they should be.
No. I'm not.
Yeah.
You don't have to defend the Browns here. What would you think if any team decided that all the work you put in during the week on your game plan, we have to run this through our analytics guys to see if it's okay?
I think that the Browns have been beeline dysfunctional, and that feels a little bit like you're not empowering your coaching staff to me. But again, I see what 31 other teams are doing.
Well, it's one of the things we hit on the show every year at this time of like the front office and the coach being totally aligned, and it's tricky when you're not hiring both at the same time. And this is what happens: you have a group of people interviewing potential coaches, and where if you hired McDaniels, he would essentially make some of the people interviewing, redundant or out of a job. So of course they're not going to hire him, and that's potentially problematic. But if the structure that Haslam actually is setting up, is a good idea, then it'll work out fine. I mean, it's just past history doesn't give him the benefit of the doubt.
Not at all.
Josh McDaniels not hired. Looks like he'll be back in New England for another year at the very least. I feel like Browns fans seem to be hoping it was McDaniels.
I think that
but it doesn't feel like a huge miss there. I mean,
no, but I think that
I kind of like Saleh just because I wanted to see what Saleh felt like a wild card.
Well, there also, did you see the clip where there was some sort of interview being staged, and there's a Niners sort of office door behind it, and the door barrels open, and Saleh runs through on his cell phone and sees the camera and darts off screen, and everyone's like, was he talking to the Browns on his phone right there? Because it was right before the Vikings-Niners game, which we'll get
to. Real quick, because this would fall through the cracks otherwise, the Broncos make a move on their coaching staff that surprised people. Rich Scangarello. Skangs. He's out after 1 year as the OC there, and he's replaced by Pat Shermer, the recently dismissed head coach of the Giants. Shermer obviously has a long history as an offensive coordinator and an offensive mind. That makes sense that they would want to bring him in the building, but people were surprised, Greg, that this whole angle, Drew Lock, he's had the nice ending to their season. Their offense got better near the end of the season. Why kind of blow things up and start over? Your thoughts?
I think John Elway just is dead set on improving this offense, and they weren't in love with Skangs as a first-year coordinator. They're getting a guy who has a lot more experience than Shermer. Not sure you're going to go wild about Pat Shermer either, but kudos to him for the old double dip. He's going to be getting that nice Giants head coaching check, and then get a little something from Mr. Elway.
Scrange.
Vic Fangio was determined to upgrade. Fangio was determined to upgrade this offense, and it was not improved at the end of the year. They averaged 289 yards in Drew Lock starts compared to 308 from the other quarterbacks, and they were the only team in the NFL to finish bottom 5 in all 4 of points, yards, third down percentage, and red zone percentage.
Maybe this is a little La Ravil Magnifico, that despite what Elway said at the end of the season, he's not that freaked out that Drew Lock has to start over with the new coach, because maybe he's not in love with Drew Lock anyway at this point.
Wow.
I'm just saying, if he really did finish strongly and you really believed in this kid, he's my future, maybe you would hesitate to make a change here? For the sake of continuity?
And Shermer's solid, but I did see a tweet that stuck in my head a little bit. Just like Shermer's, gone a long way the last few years with, on the reputation of an offense where Case Keenum played like Lamar Jackson for 8 games. Where Case Keenum was just basically running around and
what comparison did you just make?
Like Case Keenum was running around and defenders were clashing into each other, falling all over before he threw a 60-yard bomb, and suddenly Pat Shermer's getting all the credit for it. I mean, that was can you remember that? That was a wild time, the Case Keenum Vikings half season.
That was a wild time.
All right, that ends our halftime. Let's get back to action. Let's head to Baltimore. Shocker at the bank.
Tannehill under center. Play fake. Tannehill looking, throwing deep downfield, going for Raymond, who's there. Can he hold it? Yes! Touchdown! Titans! Khalif Raymond went to the ground as he laid out, selling out, and scoring in the divisional round.
The hay is outside the barn. It's everywhere. And it's not going in for the Ravens. As Mike Keith just told you, it was exactly the opposite of what people expected. The Titans show up and blow the doors off the Ravens, 28-12 at the bank. Ryan Tannehill making big passes early on. Derrick Henry doing what Derrick Henry does, 30 carries, 195 yards. That's big boy football, Chris Wessling. And here we are. The 9-7 Titans have now won 2 playoff games, and they knock off the number 1 seed in the AFC and the team that everyone seemed to believe was the number 1 team in the NFL. How'd they do it?
Well, I loved what Vrabel said after the Patriots game when they asked him about how do you measure a team's toughness, and he said short yardage, both lines, kick coverage, and the run game, and the Titans excelled in all of those areas. And I think everybody knows that the 2 fourth-down stuffs were the turning points in the game. After the first play, Tannehill hits that perfect play-action bomb to Khalif Raymond. And after the second one, on 3rd and 1, Derrick Henry goes 66 yards after that. Those were backbreakers. I did think the other really deflating sequence was that drive just before halftime, Lamar Jackson's best drive of the game, where Ian Eagle is trying to tell us on 3rd and 16 they should go conservative and just, go for something and just punt it back to the Titans. And he ends up hitting the pass. And
the bird taking us straight here.
That great one-handed catch by Hollywood Brown in the middle of a Bermuda Triangle of Titans defenders. But it's so deflating to have the clock beat you right there and you run out of time.
Got a shot at the beard while we're here?
No, just like
Ian Eagle. Snipe the beard from the book depository?
This is 2020, not 1994. You don't just run the ball into the line on 3rd and 16.
I know it sounds.
Come on.
I would like to hear more.
Come on, Bird.
And
that's a big stage for you, Bird.
We've kind of liked,
you
always, Eagle in the past.
You're a huge fan of the bird and the beard, the beak and the bird.
Mark once told an entire bar full of people they better start respecting Ian Eagle.
Well, they weren't.
Did they respect him by the end of the night?
I don't know if the message was extremely clear, but I know this sounds so basic, but the one thing that hit me watching the Baltimore's 2 losses this year was the only way to kind of get them out of the monstrous flow they seem to get in every game was to get lucky with major mistakes and turnovers, and that's what happened in this game. And unlike the Chiefs, I really expected. I was watching this at home with Colton, who was thought the Ravens were going to go to the Super Bowl, was kind of blown away by what was happening because the Titans are just had not been on everyone's radar to this degree, especially not this juggernaut version of the last couple weeks. And they could not get out of their own way. And I just waited and waited for them to get back on track in their flow, start doing what the Chiefs did down the stretch today, and it never happened. It was like observing just a bad dream that you expect to wake up from, and it's actually October 8th, and they're 7-0.
I wouldn't say that Lamar Jackson and the Ravens were on tilt in this game, but you could see it in their faces and you could sense it in that crowd that there was a bit of shock. That
they don't play from behind. Yeah, they haven't been in these situations.
I think part of the shock was it didn't feel like this was luck that was leading to the Titans pouring it on and jumping out to this 14-0 lead and essentially coasting to a win. They just got beat, and they got beat handily, and that is pretty hard to figure out. And we were talking about it last week, Mark. You were making the point that people tend to get too wrapped up in the team that just played and forget about the bye week. This was the other side of the coin where the team that had the bye and then the team that was so good that they didn't even play week 17, they're big guys, they come out and they did look rusty. And I do not want this to be like the storyline that everyone talks about, but it's fair to bring it up that the Ravens were just cooking all season. They disappear for 20 days, and when they come back, they're a different team.
They were taken out of their element. I mean, their running backs had 9 carries in this game.
Ingram's injury
killed
missed
them. Mark Ingram a lot.
They did. He had a run or two where he looked okay, but they didn't use Gus Edwards. They just didn't hand the ball off. When Marquise Brown is catching 7, Snead catches 6. It's just that's not exactly who the Ravens are. And I give so much credit to the Titans for taking them out of who they are, especially on offense. You know, the Titans offense, that is, the Ravens built their team from the back to the front. And I think the Rams did this. I think the Patriots did this. I think the Titans have done this. That it's an interesting, maybe smart way to use your cap space, build up this big secondary, and they've been blitzing like crazy. All the money's back there. They couldn't even play those guys. Like, Jimmy Smith barely played in the game because the Titans didn't have many receivers on the field. It was they had to defend something they weren't really totally ready to defend. You can't blitz every down, which is basically what they did all season when the other team's not throwing the ball. It was like they kind of neutered what the Ravens were doing so well, and I think that was true on the other side, where they really dared them to pass all game, and the Ravens obliged, and they couldn't do it.
I felt like Lamar Jackson's passes were, he's been a crisp thrower in other games, to the point where that was one of his biggest, elements of growth this season. He just seemed to be off. And name another game for Baltimore this year where they had a drive crumble at the 36 with an interception, another one crumble at the 31 with a Lamar Jackson pick, and then a drive that crumbled on downs at the Titans 18. They left points on the board, and then they got into a really rough position in the second half.
I actually think Lamar played and threw the ball pretty well after the first quarter, but the short yardage runs that got stuffed were an absolute killer.
Why is he throwing the ball 59 times?
And then he had 3 turnovers. I'm not really going to put the first one on him. That was the sort of bad luck that you're talking about, that suddenly it got spooky. That was basically a drop by Hayden Hurst. The other 2 turnovers were on him, and that's not what he did during the season. I mean, he threw a bad pick, and he fumbled and lost the ball that he shouldn't have, and that fumble to me was pretty telling of that game too. Jeffrey Simmons just took the ball away. I am forgetting right now who was the Raven that was there, but when Lamar fumbled it, there was a Ravens player there first. It seemed like he had recovered, and Jeffrey Simmons just comes in there and steals the ball. And that was kind of like one of the big plays of the game, is he just grabbed it away from him.
And on the flip side, you have Jonnu Smith making one of the better catches we've seen in 10 years worth of playoffs.
The split butt cheek.
They were just making the split butt cheek catch. They were making plays, and the little trick play from Derrick Henry into
Beautiful jump pass.
Come on, I mean, they got creative, and they, against the Patriots, they didn't care about New England's legacy. They didn't care about Foxborough or any of that nonsense, or Scott Zolak. They had no fear. And my question was, would that carry over to this week? Because we talked about the Titans being loose, but the Ravens have been loose the entire season, and they just simply carried on with the same exact force and power of a week ago.
You talk about that no fear, and to me, the one play that is emblematic of the Titans team is Derrick Henry shoving Earl Thomas around, and the stiff arm, and then shoving him in the back. I wrote an article in 2016 when John Robinson was hired as GM. Their purpose in life is going to be get big and shove around all these teams that are going nickel and dime packages, getting small and speedy at linebacker. And the Titans' plan was, let's draft Jack Conklin at right tackle, put him with Taylor Lewan, pick up some guards, and plow Derrick Henry through your defense, and that's what they've been doing. This is a tough team, and they remind me so much. Mark, we're old enough for this. John Riggins and the Hogs with the Redskins, where they are on a historically great playoff run with their running game.
I think when the Texans go up 14-0, then 21-0, then 24-0, the reason why it felt like the Chiefs had a chance is because the Chiefs are so explosive, obviously, and the Texans, they didn't have a Derrick Henry. That's why once it got to 14-0 in this game, they also have Derrick Henry, who is the evolutionary Earl Campbell right now. You knew the Ravens were in serious trouble, and I do not want to overshadow what the Titans did, because, and you Titans fans always think I'm against you. I am really, how could you not be out? I mean, how impressive they played. It was incredible, but I keep going back to, I cannot believe the egg that the Ravens laid in this game. I mean, they were 8 for 8 in the regular season on 4th and 1. They go 0 for 2 in this game. That's insane. They had 5 drop passes, according to PFF, the most in a game that they've had all season. And Lamar Jackson, who I didn't think played poorly, but it's crazy. He threw it 59 times. He ran how many times? 20 times.
He touched the ball on more plays in this game than any quarterback in NFL history.
It's like
in any game.
It was just like,
isn't that crazy?
With Mark Ingram banged up, it's just like, Lamar, save us. And one player can't do it all.
He ran for 143 yards.
It's crazy, and there was a lot of that padding at the end of the game. But Marlon Humphrey, the Ravens safety, he was very honest about what he felt happened to Baltimore in this game.
You got to look yourself in the mirror, and I think it's this team right now, his identity is get the playoffs and choke, and just it is what it is. That's just the hard truth.
Really?
They haven't won a playoff
Double
game.
down on that tonight.
They've lost. The Jaguars have won 2 more playoff games in the last 5 years than the Ravens. The Ravens haven't won any.
I don't think that's
true. Right. I don't think that's true. That's their reputation. I think that's his way of dealing with anger, and a defense like the offense for the scoring 12 is wild. That's the lowest that the highest scoring
Left a
NFL
lot of
team
points on the field.
has ever scored. But the defense played pretty poorly too. As good as the Titans defense was in short yardage, I think of the 3 runs that Tannehill picked up. And Tannehill's not getting a lot of love for these performances, but he had one for a touchdown where he made a great decision not to pass it off, made a great read, like kind of bowled over a guy into the end zone. That's a type of Lamar Jackson play. He had another first down he picked up with his legs that led to the first touchdown of the game right near the goal line, and he had another quarterback sneak later in the game. So I know his numbers haven't been
too much
unbelievable.
Box score scouting. He's playing well.
He's done his job. They just haven't needed it. They're just doing it a different way.
It's pretty incredible, though. Under 100 yards passing in both games.
And
they've won easily both games.
First quarterback to win 2 playoff games in a row like that since Terry Bradshaw in the Steel
I forgot who
Curtain.
tweeted this, but their hope was that the Titans would win the Super Bowl, and over the course of 4 playoff games, Tannehill would throw for less than 400 yards, which seems possible. By the way, footnote, Dan, you won your lock. I not boldly locked up the Ravens, kind of hedging my bets, trying to get into a late season showdown with Greg. Lost.
The Ravens always screwing you. It doesn't matter what the context is.
There is a history to that. But Dan and I now sit 2 games behind Greg, so we are just aiming for a 3-way tie, and whatever he does from
Greg
here
needs
on
to
out.
do is get 1 pick
2
right
back
in the last
with 2 to
weeks.
play. Yeah, I just got to get 1 right.
Lamar Jackson set career highs in completions, 31, incompletions, 28, pass attempts, 59, passing yards, 365. As Greg mentioned, he runs for 143 yards. He really did stuff the stat sheet, and if you're box score scouting again, you're saying, wow, he had one of the great NFL games in a losing effort ever, but that wasn't the case either. He didn't bring his A game either. It was just, to me, remarkable what happened here.
I was kind of proud of football Twitter. You had to kind of hunt for people to have lousy takes on Lamar Jackson after the game as if they were going to bury him. You had to go and find them. They weren't out there.
I found a couple howlers.
There were a few.
If anything, the more annoying thing was the guy in the press conference, and this happens all the time, who goes, Lamar, a lot of people are going to be saying, that you struggled with the playoffs. How hard is it going to be for you to deal with, people saying that? It's like, you said it. You don't have to ask that. You don't have to ask that.
They say.
Right.
He's like, people are going to be talking about your playoff struggles. No, man. You're talking.
Own your criticism. All right, the Ravens.
Little punk.
The Ravens
there you go, Greg.
home.
Get him. Get that little punk.
Put a name on it if we're gonna really.
I don't know who it was actually. I did rewind it because I kind of wanted to figure out by the voice who it was, but I couldn't tell.
I do want to get. I don't know what it does or what it doesn't do, but the little calf massage.
I like that thing.
Taser gun that Mark Ingram was using. And you knew once he was doing that, he's like, oh, they're done.
Wait, it was a
Mark
taser gun?
It wasn't a taser gun. It was like pointed and it was going up and down.
It was like violently massaging his calf.
I have one of those things, and it's the goddamn best thing in the world. I mean,
they got him back on the field.
It's not pointy like that. No, it's the more conventional one you've probably seen. Like you see him on the sideline sometimes.
That trip,
I consider it like a third child.
I went on a trip with Mark Ingram, by the way. Mention that to you.
Yes.
Yeah. But there was a player that had the massage thing Greg is talking about, and I thought about that. But this one was much more.
Yeah, that was crazy.
This was much more pointed and very dangerous looking.
Masculine, almost like a medieval weapon.
Yes, it looked medieval to some degree.
Quick update on Rhoda, Keisha's mom, big Lamar Jackson fan.
Yeah.
She had sewed her own Lamar Jackson Ravens pants and socks and went to Buffalo Wild Wings to go watch the game, and
she went to B-Dubs.
She went to
It's tough out here for a St. Louis Rams fan.
By the way, we don't have a sponsor, so B-Dubs, come at us.
She was kind of despondent, but had a really positive attitude after the game, and basically said this is a confident, growing quarterback, and it's a good team. All they have to do is get stronger next year, surround him with better weapons, and we're talking about an MVP embracing the challenge and coming back even better next year.
It's true.
It sounds like a mother.
It's hard to get back,
Lamar's
though.
mom.
It is hard to get back, but they are set up great. Marshall Yonda might retire. Jimmy Smith is probably gone, but they have not nearly as many changes as they made a year ago. Cap space, I don't know. They're set up pretty nicely.
Is Derrick Henry going to have the greatest playoff run in the history of the NFL for a running back?
He's been on
he's
top.
entering the conversation.
They need to win.
Now.
Yeah, they need to win this next one. And,
oh, my God. Unbelievable. So the Tennessee Titans will play the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC title game at Arrowhead. Let's close it out with the first game of the weekend at the Big Bell Bottom.
Third down and 9. Here comes the gold rush. Cousins back, throws out right. Intercepted by Richard Sherman. And Sherman will take it back inside the 30-yard line. Dropped on the Minnesota 28-yard line. Your best players are playing their best right now.
Good call there, Greg Papa. Niners Radio Network, Richard Sherman. He saw it coming. He read Kirk Cousins. He made the play, a big interception. The Niners get the ball back. They run it 8 times in a row for a touchdown. Goodbye. Game over. San Francisco cruises to a 27-10 win over the overmatched Minnesota Vikings. Mark, the Niners dominated this game on defense and in the running game. I don't care what era we're in. You're in good shape when you're doing that.
I mean, it's one of those games where you could tell within 5 or 6 minutes that the Vikings, and they have done this a number of times late in this season, pulling, Wes, as you tweeted, just an ultra no-show. They just were not there. And that's why I just consider the Niners so dangerous, because they got finally healthy on defense, and I thought Dee Ford made a couple plays early that mattered. You're getting big plays from Kendrick Bourne. You've got Tevin Coleman, who's been relatively, not really the big part of this lineup, used excessively. Kyle Shanahan must have just thought this is the guy to lean on this week. Jimmy G doing what he needed to do, 1 turnover early, but really made a lot of great throws, and they just absolutely dominated. And the Vikings, to me, did not. The one thing that concerned me, and we mentioned this on the preview show, was you have to establish right away Dalvin Cook, like they did a week ago against the Saints.
Oh, they tried so hard.
They really, really tried, to the point where it was like, give me a break. But he had I think he had 18 yards on the entire day, and they just could not play the kind of offense they wanted to play. And at the point where we talked about Kevin Stefanski, and they were saying that Cleveland was looking at that game as a referendum of Salah versus, Stefanski. I mean, Salah absolutely dropped an A-bomb on the Vikings, so I don't know how they came out with the answer they did on that front. But this was one. You're going to get
not
one.
To think about it too much.
No, I don't. But you're going to get one of these every divisional round weekend. I feel like just an almost. You have to just sit back and accept it. A beatdown, and this is. I think Vikings fans probably within 15 or 20 minutes of kickoff just said, I understand we are not going to compete in this game.
This is an easy one to digest if you are a fan of the losing team, because, they're outgained. Well, the Niners only put up 308 total yards of offense, but when you put up 147 and a big chunk of that comes on a Diggs play early on, they just were unable to do anything in this game. And it was so clear, even though they were hanging around score-wise for much of the first half and even early in the third quarter, the game just felt over pretty quickly.
Yeah, even in that third quarter, the 49ers were only up by a little bit, but they had 20 first downs to the Vikings 4 at that point.
That's a perfect stat to look at.
12 straight runs down your throat to put the game out of reach.
That's just disrespectful.
And a reminder by the 49ers that when they're healthy, this team is exceptionally deep and talented, to the point where you've got Matt Breida as a garbage time afterthought. You can do things like put Emmanuel Mosley in your starting lineup and take Ahkello Witherspoon out if he's struggling a little bit. They've just got a lot of parts that they can move around. You can have Dee Ford as a designated pass rusher when he's healthy. Quan Alexander in there making plays. This is a deep, deep, talented team.
Yeah, that drive where they just ran it down their throats. And really the whole game, if you watch the 2 running games, I kind of was thinking, you had Kubiak on one side and you had Kyle Shanahan on the other side. And he's like, I am the real Shanahan. I am the real son of Mike Shanahan. We have the Broncos running game. We're the offensive line that you can just put in anyone behind, like Raheem Mostert or Cole, whoever it is, and we're going to be able to run the ball, whereas you have an all-pro running back, and you're trying to be the Shanahan running game, and it's not really happening.
And I think the surprise was because coming off of last week, and one of the reasons I think, Greg, that you were high on them was that the Vikings defense looked like they had turned a big corner, but it mattered a lot to get Mike McGlinchey and Joe Staley back at tackle. I mean, to your point, when they're healthy, now their line is healthy again, and I don't see an overt weakness, because you don't have to have Jimmy G do what Patrick Mahomes is doing. He threw for 131 yards, but they imposed the will. We've got a lot of these playoff teams at this point. that when you run the ball at this time of year, like, and I know that's super cliche, but the Niners simply do it effectively. And the Vikings did not have a first down in the second half until 5 minutes left when the game was over.
Well, this defense that was so unbelievable in the first half of the year, partly because of injuries, but I'm not putting it all on injuries that they weren't the same down the stretch. You just wanted to see that kind of performance. And you saw it. I mean, Armstead, Bosa, and Buckner combined for 22 pressures. I mean, those three guys alone they killed him. I mean, Cousins didn't play well. He had a bad pick. There was a couple times where he had some time and he just took an easy check down. I mean, Dalvin Cook had 6 catches for 8 yards, but I don't know. Wow. I don't think it would have mattered if he played well in this game.
Claiborne tweeted this, so credit to him, but how about your quarterback makes a play out of structure just one time?
Right.
How about when the running game is shut down, you find a way to make plays when they pressure you? I mean, you're allowed to do that. And for the second time in 4 weeks, they basically came one floater to Stephon Diggs away from 100% ineptitude on offense.
My lasting image from this game was just Cousins with his hands over his ears. He's like, I can't hear. I mean, didn't you guys see that a million times in this game? As he's just like, he's kind of shaking his head trying to hear the play call because it's so loud there, and then he's taking a check down.
It's been a good year at the Big Bell Bottom.
Yeah.
For a stadium that's gotten a ton of heat and criticism to the point where some people can't even sit on one side of the stadium because it was built in the wrong direction. There's all sorts of heat around Levi Stadium, but there have been several spots where that place has sounded loud. Here's a stat. Where was it? Did I lose it? I was so excited talking about the Big Bell Bottom.
Well, while you get there, one visual that I thought illustrated how this stadium had an ability to explode was when Joey Bosa, who was dominant yesterday with 2 sacks, was down on the ground near the end of the game with an injury, and it looked like he wasn't moving for a bit, and he was kind of whispering and not moving to the trainers. And then they kind of got away from him, and his body started shaking like Hulk Hogan-like, or they talk about all these other wrestlers. Ultimate Warrior. Just like his body and like rising up, stood up and just started dancing up and down the field, and the stadium went literally nuts.
It was his Rod Tidwell moment from Jerry Maguire.
It was
beautiful.
Remember that? Yeah, exactly.
After Rod Tidwell suffers a massive brain injury, he's doing backflips in the end zone. Here's the stat. The 49ers are the second team since the 1970 merger to allow fewer than 30 rushing yards and have more than 6 sacks in a playoff game. The other team, the 1985 Bears in Super Bowl 20. Anytime you get connected to the 85 Bears, you're doing something very, very good.
Oh, my gosh. That is why it could have been a lot worse. Like, the 49ers didn't need to score more, I almost felt like they took the foot off the gas a little bit. Like, they played really well offensively. 5 of their first 6 drives had 8+ plays. Jimmy Garoppolo and his wide receivers made plays, especially early. The numbers aren't that crazy for Jimmy G, but if you look at, I think there was 3 or 4 different 3rd and longs, which were high difficulty throws under pressure, and guys like Bourne, Samuel, and Sanders made tough catches too off of good throws. Like, Jimmy G played well too, kind of like Tannehill. The numbers weren't great, but other than the interception, he played well.
The linebacker.
Right.
Pancaked Anthony Barr.
This will be very, very tired even by Tuesday's episode, but you are going to get Kyle Shanahan versus Matt Lafleur now, which I think is a nice master-student showdown, which we just had that. Kyle
another potential for it. I am the real Shanahan.
Yeah. I don't think Matt Lafleur is the real Shanahan.
I mean, he was there in Washington under Mike Shanahan.
That's an aggressive claim by Matt Lafleur. But
he was there in Hooters once. Jeff Darlington introduced me to this brand new Washington Redskins coaching staff, and it was just it's Kyle Shanahan and a bunch of his friends, and they looked, they were 10 years, they were younger than me by a decent amount.
How old did Matt Lafleur look then?
I was like, what is happening right now?
The Flower, if he can go into San Francisco and get a W, the bearded boy becomes the bearded man.
I think he's not a boy now.
Sure.
He's moved beyond boyhood.
Adolescence?
He's an adolescent with a beard now.
He's the bearded teen.
Then he'd be a man with a beard, and no one has a problem with a man with a beard.
Richard Sherman, you heard at the top, 38 career interceptions. And he's been down this road before, Wes. He's been in the NFL's version of the Final Four several times. He knows how to play the narrative game going into the big ball game.
People just keep disrespecting us. And at the end of the day, all you can do is go out there and impose your will and execute, and that's what our D-line and our secondary and our linebackers were able to do. Our offense did a great job of scoring points and taking advantage of the opportunities. It felt good. It felt good. That's what we look like when we're totally healthy.
have they been totally disrespected?
I mean,
did I miss something there?
By Greg? But
Yeah, I was
going to
say he was talking to me specifically.
Oh, right. You were on the Vikings train. I forgot.
I mean, here's what happens. If 15 to 20% of the analysts out there pick against your team, then it's like wild disrespect or whatever.
Then everyone is disrespecting.
You know, it's not like of course, like if you have, there's a million idiots like us talking about these games, and so like only 8 out of 10 pick the 49ers in an incredibly unpredictable sport.
It's
That's
unnecessary.
The disrespect you'll find.
You've got to craft some straw men as you're going
that
into
said,
this,
it was a horrific prediction. I mean, this was a one-sided bloodbath.
I mean, in your defense, you also predicted the Vikings to lose by 30 points in the Super Bowl, so you didn't totally get it wrong. They lost convincingly. It was just a couple weeks earlier.
Sure.
Any final thoughts?
Before these playoffs started, there was one team in the last decade that ran on at least 69% of their plays. Now there are 4. The Titans have done it twice, and the 49ers did it.
Wow.
It's a running playoffs.
And it's crazy that the Ravens aren't involved, too. I was thinking that with the Titans, it was like this team who's kind of like playing football a totally different way, went into Baltimore and beat them. Like Ryan Tannehill is your revolutionary leader.
Doppelganger.
And Dean Pease. Dean Pease is just mowing through organizations who didn't want him anymore. Go up and take out Belichick. Go up and take out
him out of
Ravens.
Retirement.
Yeah, the Ravens. Oh, you try to retire me? Please. I'm Dean Pease.
Jared Valdir, Marshawn Lynch, Dean Pease. Retirement means nothing these days.
Bad job by us. We talk about coordinators all the time. We didn't bring up Arthur Smith once for the Titans, did we?
Oh, my God.
Arthur Smith, great job. What a play call on the
I know,
Derrick Henry
it's
touchdown.
funny because everyone
He's
loves
been flawless.
That's like the perfect call where if that did not work, everyone would have killed Arthur Smith. How could you have Derrick Henry and you're trying to get cute on third down in the biggest spot, but then Derrick Henry's a baller and great call.
He's in the zone, but Mike Vrabel isn't just one of these typical defensive coaches who handcuffs his offensive coordinator. He told Arthur Smith at the end of that Patriots game on a key drive, go win the game, call whatever you have to call to win the game. He didn't say run the ball, do this to the clock. He just said go win the game, and I think Arthur Smith is getting a lot of his confidence from Derrick Henry, who's the power source of that confidence, and Mike Vrabel.
He's not punting on 4th and 11.
Mike Vrabel, arrow up.
One of my favorite tropes, also analysis, play-by-play tropes of a big game or around a team. That team takes on the personality of their head coach. The Titans are their Mike Vrabel personified. That's a thing.
And so you don't buy that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
so
whatever.
Does
that mean if they're a bad team?
What are the Packers?
They're a flower in full
They're a little
bloom.
boy with a beard.
Yeah. So what are the 49ers? They're like a cool
Flat
dad who likes Lil Wayne. I mean, Kyle Shanahan's got to be a little worried here.
Little solid, little.
As our friend Andrew Hawkins pointed out, he named his kid after Lil Wayne, and Lil Wayne is a Packers fan. That's some problems.
He's got a lot of issues, Lil Wayne.
Chemical, the dependency.
But what does that mean for Perry Fuel? Like, if you take on the personality of your head coach, does that mean that because the Panthers got blown out like 4 straight weeks, that Perry Fuel is like some type of like?
I think it's typically when things are going
monster?
well. But to your point, I feel like it doesn't need to be said. I feel like if you're a football fan, you're watching your team over the course of a year, you feel that. Pointing that out feels a little excessive.
I once saw the Bengals take on the personality of Dave Shula when the linebacker came over and patted him on the head on the sideline.
Oof, rough. All right. Good recap, guys. Oh, the AFC Championship, NFC Championship schedule is as follows. Vamp, somebody say something while I.
You wanted me to say it?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Titans and the Chiefs play at 3:05 Eastern. They're up first.
Nice.
In the NFC, Packers in San Francisco, 6:40 Eastern.
I like that.
I like these matchups.
This is nice. There is no matchup where I would be annoyed, and that's usually the Patriots are involved here, so we're totally in the clear there.
It's been a
unlike
decade
Julian
since
Edelman, who is not in the clear right now.
He is actually. He did not.
He's in very big danger.
Yeah, he got
spending the rest of his life in prison.
Well, here's the thing with Edelman getting a misdemeanor for jumping on someone's car in Beverly Hills. I did the Google Maps just to see where that was, and it's where I thought it's basically like a popular shopping sort of street in Beverly Hills. Like the last place that you should be
Sure.
Like trying to like be going out on the. No, it's not even that. It's more just like, who are you trying to fool? Or who are you trying to kid that you're some sort of like cool tough guy on the town, like doing things. You're out in Beverly Hills near like Earth Cafe.
Well,
give me a break.
What time did it occur?
It was after a boozy dinner.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, Greg is treating it like a man walking down the avenue at 3 p.m., having come from
That's what I'm saying,
eating a piece of cake.
This is a very quiet, boring part of like the richest part
of
anywhere. It's pathetic.
He may not have been operating at full capacity. It may have been,
It was not a rigorous decision-making process going on in Edelman's head at the time, and I have done dumber stuff in my 40s, so I can't say anything.
As have I.
I was going to say, none of us are perfect, but, you're a grown man, 33 years old, jumping on Lamborghinis.
The first thing I thought when I read
doing,
there's a series of images that came to mind that I'm glad I didn't get caught for on certain little I'm not saying it was I didn't rob a bank or something.
We have a tweet from Paul Pierce. Is that true? Did I just hear that in my ear?
It's definitely the wrong place to be jumping on cars because they're going to call the police. Everywhere else, that's just Thursday night. But Beverly Hills, they're like, someone just jumped on my car.
Yeah.
Get this Edelman out of here.
And it was Amendola and Edelman hanging out together last night?
Yikes.
And Paul Pierce. Amendola,
that's
was he
Ricky's
taking
right
out windows
there.
with a baseball bat? Like,
what did she
like
say?
An unruly gang of 30-something
I don't
millionaires.
know. I think they went out for drinks, and he tried to be a cool guy and jumped on someone's car, and he can pay it off.
This isn't UVM.
He got arrested. We've all done.
I'm willing to
We've all been arrested.
I jump on cars every day. How do you think I get to my car at the end of the night? I hop from hood to hood. Like it's just what people do.
Of course, that's what they do.
I was arrested, but that was college.
That was also from mail fraud.
You guys are bad boys also.
I've been in trouble. I'm not going to say anything about Edelman.
Stay tuned for the after show where we go through Wes and Greg's rap sheets, arrest by arrest, and we dig into the aftermath and what it meant in terms of the family and the penal system. It's going to be a great show coming up.
Maybe it'll be a segment on our TV show Friday afternoon.
Well done.
It won't be, but that would be an amazing segment.
6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Pacific, our potentially our last TV show. Who knows?
Also, check out that all-important Saturday 3 a.m. Eastern airing, which is also
Edelman could have watched
midnight our time.
Yeah.
Well, if they had a TV in the Slammer.
True, he was in the
big
house by
then.
then.
They did not take him.
All right, we'll be back on Tuesday. Stan Hansa signing off for Quiet Storm, the mailman, the old boss, Rick Hollywood, Ryan Bartlett, and the whole gang behind the glass. Thank you to everybody. Till Tuesday.